Chapter 12. My feeling guilty was not indicative of a conscience. For many years, I thought that feeling guilty meant I was a good person. I never questioned this connection at all. I thought that if I didn't feel guilty, it meant I didn't have a conscience. And as I was brought up to be a good person, I hadn't ever considered that guilt was simply a feeling, and that any meaning attached to it was made up. One day, I was reading a book by the late Dr. Wayne Dyer, Your Erroneous Zones, and I came to a section on guilt. Dyer's book helped me realize that feeling guilty didn't make me a good person. It just made me think I was a good person. But no matter what I thought, I wasn't helping anyone else in the world by feeling guilty. Instead, I was just wallowing in this guilty feeling as a hapless victim. I decided from that day onwards that whenever I felt guilty, I would do something positive about it rather than simply feel bad. For example, for many years, I felt guilty about not being a great brother. In particular, I used to be mean to my youngest sibling and would beat him up for no reason. The pattern was that I would be bullied or have a tough time at school. I would feel bad, and when I got home, I would take it out on him. As we grew older, we didn't have a good relationship, and I felt really guilty about it. However, I never said anything directly to him about it, and my tentative attempts to reach out didn't go well. After reading Your Erroneous Zones, I made a conscious effort to shift that energy of feeling guilty towards building a better relationship with my brother. However, it still looked to me as if my motivation to build a better relationship sprang from my feelings of guilt. While Dr. Dyer's book helped me to a certain extent, it looked like I was still playing a kind of game where I was a good where I where I was a person of good moral character because I felt bad. It also didn't help me to see those feelings of guilt for what they really are, simply reflections of my thinking in the present moment. What I now understand is that guilt simply cannot tell me whether I am a good person or a bad person. There is no chart on which I can check the amount of guilt I'm feeling and see how it corresponds to my goodness or otherwise. Guilt is a reflection of my thinking about a certain action or behavior I have taken or not taken in the past. Guilt does not and cannot change the past. It often doesn't even stop a person from taking the same action again in similar circumstances. Once I realized what the feeling of guilt really was, years of guilty thinking started to shift and fall away. My guilty thoughts and my beliefs around them were like shackles of thinking in my mind that had kept me trapped in a mental prison of my own making. Once I realized those guilty thoughts were just thoughts, the shackles opened. I was free. I see now that far from making me a bad person, dropping my guilty thinking has allowed me to be much kinder to others, a more helpful member of society, and ultimately a happier person too. What's more, as these beliefs around guilt disappeared, my relationship with my siblings markedly improved. I didn't need to be motivated by guilt in order to build a better relationship with them. I could do it simply because I wanted to. My guilty thinking had been clouding my mind for years, and I'd never known any better. Now I did. I also don't need anyone else in the world to feel guilty for their behaviors or actions. I used to want a few people to feel bad for their actions. I thought it might make me feel better if they felt bad, or perhaps it would make it easier to forgive them. It simply does not make sense anymore. If someone does feel bad about their actions, they are also just feeling their thinking in that moment. As I mentioned earlier, forgiveness doesn't make sense when you understand that someone's actions can't make you feel anything. Similarly, someone feeling bad can't make me feel good or satisfied or content. If you're wondering how to drop your guilty thinking, I advise the following: don't even try. Your guilty thinking is only held in place by your thinking. Not engaging with it, not analyzing it, Not thinking about it will allow it to pass right on by, as it was always meant to do. What a gift to give yourself. Wow. What a chapter that is. I want to go back actually and just read one of the paragraphs again, which when I was reading it with you then, it just really struck me. So I'd like to go back and just share it again. Once I realized that the feeling of guilt really was, years of guilty thinking started to shift and fall away. I'm going to say it again. Once I realized what the feeling of guilt really was, years of guilty thinking started to shift and fall away. My guilty thoughts and my beliefs around them were like shackles of thinking in my mind that had kept me trapped in a mental prison of my own making. That's huge, isn't it? I mean, that we could run whole sessions, we could run a whole year speaking together just about that. My guilty thoughts and my beliefs around them were like shackles of thinking in my mind that had kept me trapped in a mental prison of my own making. Wow. When I think of the mental prisons I've created over the years, feelings of guilt, of wishing I hadn't done things, and it's so normal. We're so used to thinking in that way that to question it just sounds crazy. You feel like a mad person, really. And yet here we are, mad perhaps, questioning it, looking at the reality of this, looking at the role of thought in all of this, looking at how feeling guilty or wanting someone else to feel guilty only tells us about our thinking. It doesn't tell us about ourselves or anybody else. This is a big one, so I'd love to know what you think of this. See you on the next video.